So you can see why I'm not totally concerned, because the car is now fully up to temp and we can do this. Welcome back, I'm Tedward. Happy New Year, but of course, a new year, a new code on the E92 M3. So let me start it up and I'll show you the check engine light. I think I've got a wonky thermostat. There she is! Your favorite noise. No, I will not replace these brake pads. And of course I have a daytime running light out. This poor car, it looks so goofy right now, but the only real important code that's throwing right now is this. And if you are on the Facebook groups for these cars, you'll have seen dozens of people post this exact image with increased emissions and say, what's wrong? Well, first things first, guys. Read the codes. You can use different kinds of code readers. I use this Carly Connected Car, and you can get a 10% discount on this if you use coupon code Tedward with the link in the description. But what I like about this is that I'm able to get the BMW codes. For years, I have really only been using my generic code reader, and while it gives me most of what I need, it doesn't tell me exactly what's going on. So before I tell you all the symptoms, let's just read the codes. I'm just going to show you what it's showing. Here's the code it's throwing, 002B59, coolant thermostat monitoring. So let's talk about the symptoms and what I'm noticing with the car. Because originally, when this code first got thrown, nothing was happening. The car was running normally, it was getting up to temp, absolutely everything was fine. So you notice that the car is warming up. We have gotten a little bit of oil temperature in here and our tachometer is coming down. So all in all, you know, we know the thermostat is not stuck open. If it was stuck completely open, we really wouldn't be getting any temperature in this coolant. But let's just talk about what does happen. So if I go for a drive, we're gonna do this now, I'll notice that it struggles to get past that first dot. When you've got these BMWs, you don't want to wring them out until you're at least past the first dot on that oil temperature. So if it's never getting past that first dot, you can't redline the engine, you can't really enjoy it. You shouldn't be doing that because it's not up to temp. But it does eventually get up to temperature. Now here's the thing, depending on your driving style, you may experience this issue differently. For me, most of my driving is highway, okay? And my house is not very far from the highway. So on a 30-degree morning, I start my car, it's warming up on my way to the highway, and maybe I stop at a light or two and it idles, and that's great. It's helping that coolant get up to temperature. But then what I would do, I jump on the highway and I'm doing 75 miles per hour. And now if it hasn't already warmed up, it's gonna have a harder time if that thermostat is slightly open. If that thermostat is slightly open, it's allowing coolant to go through the radiator rather than just circulating it through the engine to warm up. And now that I'm introducing all kinds of cooling properties by driving fast down the highway and letting that air go through the radiator, it's never going to come up to temp. So if you do get this warning light and you're noticing that the car is warming up just fine, it's likely because BMW, this code is getting thrown because it's not warming up in a certain amount of time. So if the car notices that, ooh, you were supposed to be at 200 degrees Fahrenheit already, and it's not, that's about when it's gonna throw a code and say, hey, something's off. This coolant should be at 200 degrees a minute ago, and it's not. See, right now, we're getting up to this dot, and we may see it jump over the dot, we may see it waver a little bit. This is why I haven't replaced the thermostat yet, is because I have seen this code 3 times in the last 2 years. It's insidious, and it's starting to get slightly more frequent. So I do know that it's probably having a harder time at the initial startup. Typical obvious symptoms of a failing thermostat are that your car is overheating, right? If your thermostat stays closed and it never opens and it's fully broken and it's fully closed, then your car, yes, it'll get up to temperature, and then it will go far beyond that because it doesn't know enough. It cannot physically open to let coolant go through that radiator. So that's number one. That's the worst possible case scenario, because you overheat your engine, you're gonna do a lot of damage, you can warp things, and that can be irreparable. That's not good. The better case is that your thermostat is stuck open. So your car never warms up. And I've seen this in extreme situations where it literally doesn't even get beyond 120 degrees. You're never going to get any heat in this engine, and it'll be cold. Now, the downside of that isn't necessarily that you're going to blow your engine. It's that, one, you can't really use your engine at higher RPMs or load because your engine is not warmed up. It's not a great idea to wring out a cold engine. Two, you're going to get poor fuel economy because the emission systems think that you're in like cold start mode still. So you may get really bad fuel economy. You might just really burn through fuel. But the case that I'm having right now is that my thermostat is what I think to be slightly open. It's not closing all the way. So when it's warming up, it's having a hard time getting up to temperature and getting up to that point right now. So right now, we're just sitting right below where it really needs to be. So now the car is up to a reasonable temperature, although it is not at 210 degrees yet. So it's not fully warm, and that dog is a real little tire biter. Not a great idea. So it's still not a great idea to wring out the car. And that's why I think it's going to be about time to replace this thermostat and have that done. Now, should you do the water pump at the same time? With the S65s, these water pumps typically do not break. Older BMWs do tend to have water pump failures. So yes, I think if you're in BMW land, a lot of people say, oh, you got to do the water pump when you do the thermostat. The S65, you don't really have to do that. It's not a terrible idea to do that if you'd like to. So the moral of the story is don't freak out just because your car throws a check engine light, but also don't go ask everybody what's wrong with my car without reading the codes. Read the codes first. Give yourself the ability to get information. Data is king. And these M3s, these BMWs, they like to throw codes. They're very sensitive. So if something's even slightly off, it's gonna let you know. It's not the end of the world. And if it is the end of the world, it will try to protect itself by going into limp mode. So you can see why I'm not totally concerned, because the car is now fully up to temp and we can do this. And it's fine. It runs, everything's happy. And in the cold weather, I've noticed that this car doesn't really like to get up to 210. That might just be because of this wonky thermostat, but it's always slightly below. And in the summer, in hot weather, it'll always be slightly above 210. I mean, look, that's just, we live in an environment that's changing. If it's cold, your car's gonna run slightly colder. If it's hot, your car's gonna run slightly hotter. Now, the only thing I would say is I may not embark on a long road trip with these conditions, because the problem is if this thermostat decides it wants to stay open completely, right? Now I have an engine that won't warm up and I'm going to be driving it and I'm just going to be sucking fuel. Like, that's not going to be fun. And I'm going to have to go find some indie BMW mechanic, or God forbid, go to like a BMW dealership and get just totally bent over on labor rates and pricing to have a thermostat replaced. So that's not a great idea. I do want to keep it somewhat local until I have it replaced. Or the worst case scenario, it gets stuck closed, which I don't think is going to happen with this one, because it seems to be stuck slightly open. But if it got stuck closed, then we've got issues, because now I'd have an overheating M3, not a good situation. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I hope that this is helpful. I hope that if you have a wonky thermostat in your BMW M3, you don't feel so alone in the world, but you also understand that, hey, wait a minute, it's probably just slowly failing and giving you lots of time to know that it's ready for a replacement.